Hey guys, welcome to Finalysis. My name's Matt. Today I'm joined by my friend Callan, and this is our entry for the One Legendary Scene collaboration in honor of Legend of Korra's 10-year anniversary since its debut. Our selection of scene is what we term Tenzin's Last Stand, and that comes from Book 3, Episode 11, entitled The Ultimatum. Thank you so much for joining us today as we get set to embark on an examination of what makes this moment so very special. Okay, so it's a bit difficult to narrow down everything that makes this scene so particularly legendary, as it's really more an extended sequence rather than a singular moment. We're kind of cheating a little bit.
And we're honestly not going to try to cover it all. We're just going to talk about what hits the most powerfully for the two of us.
Now, what really strikes a chord with me comes in at the tail end of this sequence.
But my point's more important right now. While I share Matt's views on all of the elements, pun not intended, to follow, what makes this sequence such a powerful and exciting one for me to watch comes at the very start. Now, in a vacuum, the situation stands strong by itself. It's exciting, it's well choreographed, it's dramatic. But the additional layer that really adds in the oomph for me personally is the fact that the scene scratches a particular narrative itch that very rarely gets touched upon. It's that choice of the protagonist to resist a no-win situation, particularly one that's been forced upon them by the villain. Too often in narrative situations with this scene's kind of framing, a character will hear the spiel of you don't have a choice and it's attached to conditions, ally or civilian in peril, principle at stake, etc. And they'll simply submit to it, giving up character agency so the plot can carry them off as a prisoner or as leverage or as bait or whatever.
Hello, Carson. Let's go to your room.
And there's an obvious reason for this. The writer is putting the hero in this position for a reason. Good villains need to be able to command the rooms they walk into, and the best villains need to be able to do it with style. And this isn't an issue by itself, it's a great way of advancing the plot and enriching characters. Even when the antagonist is the one being put in the nigh unwinnable situation, it's usually because the writer wants to demonstrate their threat level, the insurmountable odds of the protagonist's journey, or just for the simple sake of ratcheting up the tension on a generic level. Where the frustration of this trope kind of comes into it for me is that the same equation so rarely applies to the protagonist of a story. I mean, we have so many examples of the villains getting away when they really shouldn't. The Joker, Kilgrave, Thanos, in the most infuriating way possible. From the well-written escape clauses to the terrible ones, antagonists are slippery as butter when it isn't time for the finale yet. But when it comes to the good guys, if they've been captured in a big climactic moment that's been built up to and is thematically underscored, you can bet your ass they're not going anywhere. And the writer doesn't want them to. If the point of the scene is for the hero to escape, it will almost always be as the result of some outside force. And it'll typically take one of two forms. The villain does something stupid and out of character.
Could I have some water?
Okay.
Or they'll be bailed out by the friends they made along the way. Sometimes by friends they didn't even know they'd made. The results vary in quality, but it's how these things normally go. But situations like these take the choice, the agency, out of the character's hands. And that's what makes this...
You don't have a choice.
Yes, I do.
legendary.
Now, while I'm in total agreement with everything Callan's just said, and not to detract from any of his points, what really sells this moment for me is the very real sense of dread at play here, and that's down to the build-up we've had all throughout Book 3. All season long, the show has been doing its best to tell a more compelling political story than we've had before. We've had Korra growing into a more mature avatar and dealing with the consequences of her past decisions on a macro scale, Lin and her sister doing the same on a more personal level. There are also those themes of the greatest good for the common people, as well as destiny, civil service, and the calls to action and duty. These are all matters the show juggled in turn, dealing with some more successfully than others, but I credit the show for aiming as high as it did. The low point of this season's writing concerned the show's handling of the Earth Queen. An issue that came smack to the forefront of events was the question of how much violence is justified in the name of necessary change. The Earth Queen being characterized as a heartless, power-hungry lunatic weakened one of the show's standout moments, that being her own assassination. While what was happening on screen was a stunning development in the story, and pretty shocking and gruesome for a children's animated series. The unfortunate fact that the Earth Queen was impossible to sympathize with on any level made her feel less like a real character to me and more like a barely functioning prop. If she'd been written with more nuance and the ability to actively challenge Zahir's philosophy through a tough but still fair code of conduct, instead of the utterly pointless and short-sighted cruelty that characterized her regime, we'd have had a much more interesting clash of ideals. Her death could have been a moment that, rather than being merely pivotal to the plot, was instead one that was truly haunting on a moral and emotional level. As a character, she wasn't executed as well as I'd have liked, pun most definitely intended, but the Earth Queen's death still paid off in another way. The show had proven itself. They had proven that they were willing to go there, which made Tenzin's last stand all the more brilliant. You had a thrilling back-and-forth engagement against the Red Lotus, who pretty much wasted everyone they came up against at this point in the story, suddenly being challenged by the children of Aang and Katara. In the case of Zahir especially, we finally saw him put in his place during the only true Airbender-exclusive matchup from the entire series, in which Tenzin demonstrated his mastery in glorious fashion. For me, the thing that stands head and shoulders above the rest is the moment when the tide turns against our heroes and Tenzin is left to fight alone. My heart was racing the first time I watched this scene. I realized that a very real part of me was convinced Tenzin, a fictional character, was about to die. For the first time in Avatar history, and yes, that includes the superior original series, which never achieved this, I was actually afraid for a fictional character's life. That's powerful. I can't help but feel that the show might have been better had Tenzin actually been killed here, as I don't remember them ever doing anything especially interesting with him after this point, aside from that beautiful ceremony for Jinora at the end of the season. Or, if it couldn't be Tenzin, couldn't anyone other than a one-dimensional villain have been killed to really sell the upping of stakes? Sorry to say, but the way I see it, someone good should have really bitten the dust. Like, say, Tonraq, maybe? Oh well, as a Tenzin fan, I have to admit, a part of me is really glad things worked out as they did, and all in all, this was truly one legendary scene.